When I opened my eyes, the world felt like it had been ripped from under me. The sterile hospital room spun in slow motion as I blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights above. My body felt foreign, too heavy, too stiff, like someone had stuffed lead into my veins. A nurse stood nearby, her face a blur of concern and pity. "You've been in a coma for 28 years?" she said softly. But those words hit me like a freight train. 28 years? It couldn't be real. I remembered going to bed at 17, young and full of life, only to wake up here, at 45. The shock was paralyzing. I reached for my reflection in the small mirror propped on the bedside table, trembling fingers brushing over what used to be my smooth cheeks. What stared back at me was unrecognizable. A stranger with deep-set wrinkles, graying hair that looked more like brittle straw than anything alive, and eyes clouded by time. Who was this person? Was this really me? Panic surged through every nerve ending as reality crashed down. I wasn't just older, I was ancient compared to the version of myself I'd left behind. And then came the betrayal. Not from others, but from my own body. When I tried to sit up, my arms wobbled like jelly, refusing to obey even the simplest commands. Walking? Forget it. My legs buckled beneath me the moment I attempted to stand, sending me sprawling onto the cold linoleum floor. Humiliation burned hotter than any physical pain as nurses rushed in, their murmured apologies doing little to soothe the storm inside me. How could I live like this? This wasn't living. It was existing in a prison made of flesh and bone that no longer belonged to me. But the worst part wasn't the physical deterioration. It was the isolation. As I lay there, helpless and disoriented, people wandered in and out of the room, speaking in hushed tones about the miracle patient. Yet none of them stayed long enough to truly see me. Their faces were unfamiliar, their voices distant echoes of a life I didn't recognize. Where were my friends? My family? Had they all moved on without me? The thought clawed at my chest, leaving an ache so profound it felt like grief. And when I finally mustered the courage to call out, to beg someone, anyone, to explain how I ended up here, the silence that followed was deafening. No one answered. Or maybe they couldn't hear me. Either way, it felt like being buried alive. Every attempt to reconnect with the world around me ended in failure. Conversations faltered because I didn't know who these people were or what they expected from me. Technology baffled me. Touchscreens, holograms, robots serving food trays. It was like stepping into a sci-fi movie where I hadn't read the script. Even basic interactions became minefields. I once mistook a doctor for an old friend, only to have him recoil in horror when I hugged him, shouting something about professionalism. Mortified, I retreated further into myself, convinced that I'd become invisible in a world that had already written me off. And yet, despite everything, the fear, the humiliation, the crushing loneliness, I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker lurked beneath the surface. Why had I woken up now, after nearly 3 decades? What secrets had they kept hidden while I slept? Each unanswered question gnawed at me, fueling a growing suspicion that my awakening wasn't a miracle at all. Maybe it was a mistake. Or worse, a trap. As the initial shock of waking up in a stranger's body began to settle, another storm brewed, one far more personal and devastating. Brad, my boyfriend from before the coma, was supposed to be my anchor in this chaotic new reality. But instead, he became the embodiment of betrayal. When I finally managed to track him down, after days of wandering through unfamiliar streets and dodging judgmental stares, I found him sitting on a park bench, laughing with a woman who wore a wedding ring. His wedding ring. My knees buckled as the truth slammed into me like a freight train. He had moved on. Not only that, but he had built an entire life without me. A wife, a mortgage, maybe even kids. And here I was, still reeling from 2 decades of lost time, clinging to memories of a love that clearly no longer existed. The pain wasn't just emotional, it felt physical, like shards of glass slicing through my chest. "Brad," I choked out, my voice trembling. He turned, his smile faltering when he saw me. For a moment, there was recognition in his eyes, followed by something darker. Guilt. Before I could confront him, the woman beside him stood up, her expression sharp and territorial. "Who's this?" she demanded, wrapping an arm around Brad's shoulders. Her tone left no room for doubt. She owned him now. Brad hesitated, then mumbled something about an old friend. An old friend. Those words cut deeper than any knife ever could. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could do was stumble backward, tears blurring my vision. But Brad wasn't the only one who had betrayed me. As I pieced together fragments of conversations overheard in hospital corridors and whispered exchanges at family gatherings, I realized how isolated I truly was. Friends I once trusted were nowhere to be found. My own sister Judy avoided eye contact whenever I tried to speak to her. It was Grandma Catherine who finally let slip the truth. While I lay unconscious, those closest to me had taken advantage of my absence. My savings were gone, drained by people who claimed to care about me. Worst of all, someone had forged documents transferring custody of my unborn child, the result of a drunken night years ago, to another family. The pregnancy itself was a cruel twist of fate. At 45, my body already felt alien, but carrying a child? That was unimaginable. Every kick against my ribs served as a reminder of everything I'd lost, and everything I might lose forever. Legal battles loomed ahead, threatening to strip away the one thing keeping me tethered to this world. Without my baby, what did I have left? A broken past? A stolen future? One evening, as I sat alone in my dimly lit apartment, clutching the ultrasound picture like a lifeline, there was a knock at the door. It was Lily, a childhood friend I hadn't seen in years. She looked different, older, wearier, but her eyes held the same warmth they always had. "I heard you're back," she said softly, stepping inside. What followed was a torrent of apologies and explanations. According to Lily, everyone thought I wouldn't wake up. They acted out of fear, desperation, greed. But beneath her words, I sensed a plea, not just for forgiveness, but for redemption. Could I trust her again? Or was she just another face in the crowd, waiting for me to fall apart so they could pick up the pieces? The chaos of my life didn't stop at betrayal or the shock of waking up decades older. It spiraled into something far more surreal and dangerous. My days became a blur of bizarre encounters, each one unraveling threads I thought were secure in the fabric of reality. The first incident happened when I mistook a stranger for Judy, my sister. It was late afternoon, and I saw her sitting on a bench outside the hospital, scrolling through her phone with that familiar, absent-minded look she always had. "Judy," I called out, relief flooding my voice as I approached her. But when she turned to face me, confusion clouded her features. Not because she recognized me, but because she clearly had no idea who I was. "Oh, sorry," she said curtly, standing up and walking away before I could explain. Humiliation burned through me like wildfire. How could I have been so wrong? That's when the paranoia began creeping in. What if everyone around me wasn't who they claimed to be? What if this world I'd woken up to was some twisted experiment designed to keep me off balance? My fears weren't unfounded. A few days later, while wandering downtown trying to piece together fragments of my shattered identity, I stumbled upon a group of people who seemed oddly interested in my story. At first, they came across as sympathetic strangers. A man named Marcus introduced himself as a social worker eager to help coma survivors reintegrate into society. He promised resources, support groups, even housing assistance. Desperate for any kind of lifeline, I followed him to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. That's where things took a sinister turn. Inside, instead of counselors or aid workers, there were shadowy figures whispering among themselves. One woman stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with malice. "You're perfect," she purred, circling me like prey. "We've been waiting for someone exactly like you." When I asked what she meant, another figure shoved a mirror into my hands. Staring back at me wasn't my reflection, it was someone else entirely. The face staring back was younger, sharper, almost predatory. Panic surged through me as I dropped the mirror, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. "What did you do to me?" I screamed, backing away until my spine hit the cold concrete wall behind me. Marcus smirked, revealing rows of teeth too sharp to belong to a human being. "Nothing permanent. Yet," he hissed. "You see, we specialize in swapping bodies. And yours? Well, let's just say it has potential." Before I could process what was happening, they injected something into my arm, a burning liquid that spread through my veins like molten lava. As darkness consumed me, I felt my body shifting, stretching, changing. When I woke up again, I was no longer myself. My hands were smaller, my legs longer, my hair darker. I stared at my new reflection in horror, realizing I'd been trapped inside someone else's skin, a young woman barely out of her teens. They explained coldly that this was their business model: stealing identities, selling them to the highest bidder, leaving victims like me stranded in borrowed lives. But fate had other plans. While struggling to adjust to my stolen form, I encountered Lily again, the childhood friend who'd tried to warn me about the betrayals surrounding me. She found me huddled in an alleyway, sobbing uncontrollably. Without hesitation, she pulled me into her car and drove us far away from the city. "I know everything," she whispered as we sped down deserted highways. "About Marcus, about the body swaps, about all of it. I've been looking for you since you disappeared." Her confession only deepened the mystery. Apparently, during my coma, not only had my loved ones abandoned me, but my very existence had become a commodity. People close to me, people I trusted, had sold information about my condition to underground networks specializing in illegal experiments. This wasn't just personal vendettas anymore. It was organized crime preying on vulnerable individuals like me. Lily revealed she'd infiltrated their ranks years ago after discovering her own brother had fallen victim to similar schemes. Together, we devised a plan to expose them, but it wouldn't come without risks. To reclaim my original body, I'd need to confront Marcus directly. Doing so meant stepping back into the lion's den, armed with nothing but courage and desperation. When the moment finally arrived, I walked into the warehouse alone, disguised in my stolen identity. Marcus greeted me with a knowing smile, unaware of the trap closing in around him. With Lily coordinating reinforcements outside, I lured him into a private room under the pretense of negotiating terms. Once inside, I locked the door and revealed my true intentions. For a brief moment, fear flickered across his face, a rare crack in his otherwise impenetrable facade. You underestimated me, I spat, pressing record on a hidden camera tucked inside my pocket. His screams echoed through the empty halls as justice finally caught up with him. By dawn, the authorities had dismantled the operation, freeing countless others trapped in stolen bodies, including mine. Yet even after reclaiming myself, scars remained. Not just physical ones, but emotional wounds carved deep by betrayal, loss, and the harrowing realization that trust can be weaponized against you. In the end, survival wasn't just about escaping danger. It was about learning to navigate a world where nothing is ever truly as it seems. The chaos of my life reached a fever pitch when I discovered the full extent of my losses. Not just emotionally or physically, but financially. After waking up from a 28-year coma, I had hoped for some semblance of stability, however fragile. Instead, I found myself stripped bare of everything that once defined me. My bank accounts were frozen, drained by years of neglect and exploitation. The savings I thought would cushion my return to the world, gone. The house I grew up in, foreclosed and sold off while I lay unconscious. Even my identity, my very existence on paper, have been erased. It started with something small, trying to withdraw money from an ATM. When the machine spat out an error message claiming insufficient funds, I laughed it off as a technical glitch. But when I visited the bank in person, clutching my tattered ID like a lifeline, the truth hit me harder than any physical blow. According to their records, my account had been inactive for decades, flagged as abandoned property under state law. They couldn't or wouldn't help me reclaim what was rightfully mine. Desperation clawed at my throat as I pleaded with the teller, tears streaming down my face. "This is my life," I cried, waving the ID in front of her blank expression. She simply shrugged, muttering about policies and procedures before turning away. It wasn't just money. It was proof of who I was, a tangible connection to the past I fought so hard to remember. And now it was slipping through my fingers like sand. But losing my finances was only the beginning. A few days later, I returned to what used to be my childhood home, hoping to find solace in familiar surroundings. What greeted me instead was a cold eviction notice taped to the door. The new owners stood on the porch, arms crossed, glaring at me like I was an intruder. "You're trespassing," one of them snapped, his tone dripping with hostility. "We bought this place fair and square." I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask how they could justify taking something that wasn't theirs to sell. But the emptiness in my hands silenced me. Without documents proving ownership, I had no legal standing. No one believed me when I said I belonged here. Not the neighbors who whispered behind cupped hands as if I were a ghost haunting the streets. Not even Judy, who avoided eye contact whenever I tried to explain. Everyone had moved on, leaving me stranded in a world that refused to acknowledge my presence. As if things couldn't get worse, creditors began circling like vultures, demanding payments for debts accrued during my absence. Bills piled up on my makeshift dining table. Medical expenses, overdue taxes, loans taken out in my name without my consent. Each envelope felt like another nail in my coffin, sealing me into a nightmare I couldn't escape. Bankruptcy loomed over me like a storm cloud, threatening to wipe away whatever shreds of dignity I had left. One night, as I sifted through the wreckage of my life in a dingy motel room paid for in cash, there was a knock at the door. Standing outside was Lily, holding a cardboard box filled with old photographs and letters. Her eyes softened when she saw me. "I saved these," she said quietly, placing the box on the bed. Inside were fragments of my past, birthday cards from Brad, report cards signed by Grandma Catherine, faded Polaroids of family vacations. For a moment, relief washed over me. Maybe there was still hope. Maybe I could piece together enough evidence to prove I existed. But then Lily dropped another bombshell. "There's more," she admitted, pulling out a crumpled document. It was a court order transferring custody of my unborn child to someone else, someone wealthy, influential, ruthless. "They forged your signature," she explained, her voice trembling. "While you were asleep, they convinced everyone you weren't coming back." The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd experienced before. These weren't strangers exploiting my vulnerability. They were people I trusted. People who claimed to care about me. Rage bubbled inside me, hot and consuming. How dare they steal not just my life, but my future? I vowed right then and there to fight back, no matter the cost. Just when I thought the chaos couldn't escalate further, Brad reappeared. Not as the man I once loved, but as someone far more enigmatic and dangerous. He showed up unannounced at my motel room one stormy night, drenched from head to toe, his eyes blazing with a mixture of guilt and urgency. "We need to talk," he said, his voice trembling. For a moment, I considered slamming the door in his face. But something about the desperation in his tone froze me in place. "I didn't abandon you," he began, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "They made it look that way. The coma, it wasn't an accident." His words hit me like a sledgehammer. What did he mean? Before I could demand answers, he pulled out a crumpled document detailing a sinister experiment conducted by a shadowy organization. According to the file, my coma had been artificially induced, a test subject for their research on suspended animation. They'd chosen me because of my perfect health profile, whatever that meant. And Brad? He was never just a boyfriend. He was an undercover agent tasked with monitoring my condition. The revelation shattered what little trust I had left. All this time, I'd believed he moved on without me, built a life with someone else. Instead, he'd been part of the conspiracy that stole 28 years of my existence. "Why should I believe anything you say?" I spat, anger bubbling inside me. But Brad wasn't done. "Because they're coming for you again," he warned, gripping my shoulders. "And if we don't stop them, they'll erase you completely." As if on cue, headlights pierced through the rain outside. A black van screeched to a halt, its doors flung open to reveal armed men in tactical gear. Panic surged through me as Brad shoved me toward the fire escape. "Go, now!" he shouted, pulling a gun from his coat. I hesitated, torn between fleeing and confronting the truth alongside him. In the end, survival outweighed vengeance, and I bolted down the stairs, heart pounding like a war drum. Hours later, hiding in an abandoned warehouse, I pieced together fragments of what Brad had told me. The organization behind my coma wasn't satisfied with mere experimentation. They sought to monetize human lives, selling identities and bodies to the highest bidder. My awakening hadn't been a miracle. It was a glitch in their system. And now, they wanted to silence me permanently. But amidst the fear, a glimmer of hope emerged. If Brad was telling the truth, and despite everything I wanted to believe him, then exposing their operation might be my only chance at reclaiming my life. The question was, how far was I willing to go? Some people leave scars, others leave lessons. Burn and reborn stories that break you, then rebuild you.